Our next presenter is from the Princeton Review. Her name is, I did see her here. Miss, there you go, up the top. There you go. Moved about on me. Her name is Miss Coleen Reed. And her title is Outreach Specialist. She's with the Southwest region. And just a little bit about her. She's a graduate of the University of Nevada, Reno. She has a degree in education and she minored in business. In her role at the Princeton Review, she helps students across the region that she has jurisdiction over with test preparation and admission process. She's dedicated to certainly helping students reach their education and career goals. And in her spare time, she enjoys Disney movies and spending time with her family. So with that, Ms. Reed, I will turn it over to you. I noticed that we have Todd Clark, and I'll let you introduce him, your assistant.
Yeah, so I'll be handling all the presentation aspects. Todd will be there. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see it. And sometimes when I share my screen, I can't always see the chat box. So he will make sure to relay any questions I might be missing in the chat box. Also, feel free to take yourself off mute, ask me questions, pause me. I've gotten very good at, dealing with interruptions so it doesn't bother me. If you're like, hey, I'm confused or I have a question about this and you want to take yourself off mute, so go ahead and pause me. It will not bother me. So I am going to share my screen and hopefully you all can see it. If not, let me know. So graduate admissions test. So maybe you're considering grad school. Maybe you're thinking about a couple different programs. You're not sure the path you want to take. All of the different grad programs have some sort of standardized test that goes with them. And I'm going to try to shed some light on those tests. So we're going to talk about some testing misconceptions, some truths, how to prepare for some of these tests. And then at the end, I will make sure to also take any questions and answers that maybe I didn't answer throughout and you didn't want to pause me. I will also take those at the end. This is my email. If you are not comfortable asking a question today, that's okay. Send me an email. I'm happy to answer questions through email. Also happy to schedule a time to chat with you over the phone or via Zoom and answer questions you have that way. So these entrance exams, let's dive right in. If you are considering going to law school, you'll take the LSAT, MCAT for med school, GMAT for business school, and any other grad program will be covered by the GRE. Now there are dental programs, so the DAT is used for dental school, the OAT is used for optometry school. There is a new PACAT, so PA school used to accept the GRE. Some schools are getting away from the GRE. We won't focus too much on any of those today. We're going to focus on the four big ones, the LSAT, the MCAT, the GMAT, and the GRE. So just so I kind of know where everyone's at, if you want to let me know in the chat box, maybe which test do you plan on take, or which maybe you're considering a couple, you're considering the GMAT and the GRE. Let me know where you're at.
GRE.
GRE. Okay, I see a lot of GREs coming in the chat box as well. I was able to open it. Okay, so I see mostly GRE. So I'll touch a little bit on LSAT, MCAT, GMAT, just so you know. Maybe you're like, oh, I didn't think about law school, but maybe you're considering it now. I'll talk about that so you know what to expect. And then if you have any questions, let me know. So getting started, moving right along. So what is the LSAT? Well, the LSAT is the test that is taken to get into law school. Very simple. It doesn't test anything about the law, the Constitution, cases, nothing about that. It basically is testing your ability to think as a lawyer. The cool thing about law school is they don't require you to have any sort of specific undergrad degree. So whether you have a degree in education, a degree in political science, a degree in social sciences, or business, or a gen ed degree, they don't require any sort of prerequisite degree. So that is the cool thing about law school, is you don't really have to think going into undergrad, I want to go to law school. You can make that decision, you know, maybe your senior year, or I've seen people that have waited 10 years after they've graduated their undergrad and they're like, I want to do something different, and they go back and go to law school. That is an option as well. That is the cool thing about law school. So the LSAT stands for Law School Admissions Test. Super basic, nothing crazy. It's administered by LSAC. They're the Law School Admissions Council. So when you do an application to law school, all of that goes through LSAC. You submit your letters of your recommendation letters. You submit your transcripts. You submit your LSAT scores. You submit your essays. All of that goes through LSAC. And the nice thing is then basically you get to pick and choose the schools that you want to apply to. And then you just send those applications kind of in one bunch to the different schools. Most schools do require the LSAT. There are a few schools, the number is raised to about 50 that are accepting the GRE now. So I've talked to students who are considering maybe an advanced, like a master's in criminal justice, and they're also considering law school, but they don't know which one, and they only want to take one standardized test. You can take the GRE. Just remember that it will limit the number of law schools and which law schools you can apply to, because you have to apply to one that accepts the GRE if you only plan on taking the GRE. If you're only thinking law school, I recommend just taking the LSAT. It just gives you more options when applying to schools. So I talked about, you know, the LSAT testing your ability to think as a lawyer. Well, LSAC claims that your LSAT score is predictive of your first year performance in law school and future bar passage rates. Now, if you've ever talked to an attorney who has taken the bar is a whole nother beast outside of the LSAT, outside of law school. The bar actually does test laws, constitutions, cases, your ability to spot a case. All of those things are tested on the bar. None of those things are tested on the LSAT. So I don't know if LSAC's claim is 100% true, but I throw it out there so you know, why are they using these LSAT tests, right? Because when I show you the things that are tested, you're going to be like, I don't understand. Basically, it's testing, you know, your ability to critically think, your reading comprehension skills, your abilities to kind of issue spot. I mentioned you'll do that on the bar. The bar will give you a whole case, and you'll have to find the issues in that case. The LSAT has an argument section, so it's your kind of testing your ability to spot the argument in different passages. So for LSAT testing, when can you take the LSAT? Unlike the GRE, which we'll talk about, where you can take on most days out of the year, the LSAT has very specific times. So in 2020, they offered it in January, February, March, April, June, July, October, and November. The March, April, and June test dates did get canceled because of COVID. And then they came out with what we've been calling and what they're calling LSAT Flex. It is basically a shortened version of the LSAT, and you get to take it at home. I've had a lot of students ask me, how long are they going to offer LSAT Flex? I wish I had an answer for you. LSAC has not been super forthcoming with that information, but I've tried to keep any students that ask me, if you're like, hey, have you heard any recent announcement? I always make sure to share any recent announcements that we get. We have partnerships with these different testing organizations, so sometimes we'll get announcements a little bit earlier, and I always try to send that out. So always keep in touch with me if you're curious. Always the information is on LSAC's webpage as well. My expectation is they're going to offer LSAT Flex probably through the summer. So when is the test? Well, because it's only one day in the certain parts of the month, normally they're on a Saturday morning. The June and July test dates, they made on a Monday afternoon. So if you're like, I'm not a morning test taker, I'd rather take it in the afternoon, try to plan one of those summer test dates if you want to test in the afternoon. The cool thing about LSAT scores, and like some of the other standardized tests like the GRE, LSAT scores are good for 5 years. So say you take it this year and then life happens and you can't go and apply to schools, those scores do stay good for 5 years. LSAC allows you to test 3 times in a year, 5 times in 5 years, and 7 times in a lifetime. I don't know anybody, and I've worked for Princeton Review for 4 years now that has taken the LSAT 7 times. It's not, most people don't do it. You get the score you need within either the first time or the second time taking it, maybe even a third time. Somewhere past that, you know, let's have a conversation and figure out what's going wrong and why you're not getting the scores you need, so you don't have to feel like you have to take it 7 times. I mentioned thinking like a lawyer, right? Thinking critically, figuring out issue spotting, reading comprehension. If you've ever talked to someone who went to law school, they do a lot of reading. And I would say 80 to 90% of your time in law school is spent reading something. Cases, books, motions, arguments, all sorts of things. You're spending a lot of time reading. So this is what the LSAT looks like. You'll have a reading comprehension section that's like any other reading comprehension section you've ever seen before. You'll have 2 argument sections. Those are, you know, your ability to kind of spot different arguments, similar to a reading comprehension, a little more complex. 1 games section. If you've never done an LSAT game before, they really test your mental abilities, but they're also somewhat fun. So if you're considering law school, maybe take an LSAT practice test. I have a form at the end. If you're interested in any of the practice tests, I will make sure you get a free practice test through Princeton Review as a benefit of attending this session. So just let me know. You can try a GRE, an LSAT, a GMAT. You can try all 4. If you're interested, just let me know. And then you will get an experimental section. It's just an additional section of the ones above. You won't know which one's going to be experimental until testing day. If you have an extra section, you'll know one of them is experimental. They won't tell you which one. There's also an essay that you'll take outside of your normal LSAT testing day. They've started doing the LSAT in person on tablets, and students complain that you can't type an essay on a tablet. I understand that. I wouldn't be able to do that either. So basically you have a week after your test to go home and type your essay. With the LSAT Flex, the difference is there's no experimental there, and there's only 1 argument section instead of 2. So it's basically 3 35-minute sections. So it's much shorter. So if you take that LSAT Flex sometime, probably before this fall, you'll get that shortened version. Questions are exactly the same. They're not any harder. The scoring is exactly the same. It won't affect your score if you do take the LSAT Flex. This is what one of those games that I was mentioning looks like. We're not going to work through it. They take a little bit of time to kind of understand, but just so you can kind of understand what it looks like. And then this is a logical reasoning question. So this was one of those argument questions that I mentioned, right? Where it says, which of the following most accurately expresses the main conclusion of the economics argument? Well, I can talk today. So moving right along, MCAT. No one said MCAT, and MCAT is one that normally you prepare for a while before you go into college as a pre-med student, or you either maybe as like a sophomore, you start thinking, I think I want to go to med school. And that's just because there is a lot of science knowledge that's on the MCAT. You can't just graduate and think, oh, I'm going to go to, med school now. There are a lot of prereqs that go into the MCAT. So I won't focus too much time since no one said they were super interested. They have a system too, similar to LSAC that I mentioned. It's called AAMC. It's Association of American Medical Colleges. The MCAT is required by all US and Canadian medical schools, and it is required for both MD and DO programs. Now, DO programs are a little bit easier to get into than MD programs. So if you know someone going to med school, maybe they have a lower MCAT score, DO programs might be a good way for them to go. These are the sections of the MCAT. Lots and lots and lots of science knowledge. Biology, chemistry, biochemistry, molecular biology, psychology, sociology. All of the sciences go into physics. They all go into the MCAT. So that's why I mentioned the MCAT is one that you have to kind of think about a couple years before you're considering taking it, because there are about 7 prerequisite courses that you need to have to do well on the MCAT, just because it tests so much science knowledge. The MCAT, similar to any other standardized test though, outside of testing, specific science knowledge, concepts, things like that, it is going to test critical thinking, statistical reasoning. Those types of things, similar to any other standardized test, are also on the MCAT. It's just done through testing science knowledge instead of through, reading comprehension, the game section, math, things like that. It's just really science heavy. This is what the MCAT looks like. It is the longest of the standardized tests. So most tests are about 4 hours. All of the other ones are about 4 hours. The LSAT is 7.5 hours of total testing time. So when you go to take the MCAT, you have to plan for a full day. As you notice, most of the other tests will give you about a 15-minute break. This one gives you a 10-minute break, and it also gives you, so 2 10-minute breaks and then a 30-minute lunch break. If you do decide to take the MCAT, if you take one thing away from what I say is, no matter which test you're taking, your break should never be optional. And I say that because it's good to get your body like up and moving. I know sometimes you might be in the groove and you're thinking and you're like, I can get through this. Take the break. Use it when you have it. Also, try to go to the bathroom. If you ever remember when you were younger and you were like going on a road trip and your mom was like, did you go to the bathroom? And you're like, no, I didn't have to go. And then you're like 30 minutes into the drive and you're like, I actually have to go to the bathroom now. I've heard that happens to students on any sort of standardized test. Well, the test won't pause for you. So if you have to get up to go to the restroom, your time is going to keep running. And all standardized tests are aggressively timed. They're basically designed to make you run out of time. So if you need to go to the restroom, at least try to go on your breaks so you can get through all of the sections and you don't have to waste time getting up, to go to the restroom. This is what the scoring of the MCAT looks like. 472 to 528 is, you can score anywhere between there. An average kind of middle of the road score would be a 500. That's the mean score. Now, a mean score does not mean it's a great score. So we recommend, because there are only normally there's about 60,000 students that apply to med school, and only about 20,000 of those students turn into matriculants. So they actually get accepted into med schools. So if you're considering the MCAT, or you know anyone and they ask you and you're like, no, I attended this presentation where someone talked about the MCAT, you can say they should shoot for a 510 and above. That's a good score to get you into med school. It makes you a competitive applicant. Now, that doesn't mean if you score a 508, you're not going to get into med school. That's not what I'm saying. If you start scoring below like a 506, 505, it is much harder to get into med school. A 510 is ideally where you want to be. This is what a MCAT problem looks like, just to kind of show you if you are curious. Another one talks about, as you see, both of these are very science heavy. This one talks about IBS sufferers. I'm going to be honest, when I teach or we do MCAT strategy sessions, I always have one of our expert MCAT teachers teach them, because science is not my strong suit. I can help you with LSAT questions, GRE, GMAT questions. You start asking me MCAT questions, I'm not going to be the best person to help you, but I promise I can set you up with someone who can answer any questions you have. Because when I see Sigmund Freud, IBS, you've kind of lost me. But I can teach you all of the strategies, timing, teach you all about the MCAT itself. But if you have questions about actual, like the pedagogy of it, I can hook you up with one of our teachers. So moving right along to the GMAT. So maybe you're considering an MBA. So a lot of students think GRE is good for most grad programs, and that is true. If you are considering an MBA, which have become increasingly popular recently, the GMAT's probably going to be the best test for you. Now, you might have heard some business schools do accept the GRE, and that is true. But again, if you're going to apply to more than maybe one school, the GMAT's going to be the best test to hit all of those applications. So the GMAT is the Graduate Management Admissions Test. Nothing crazy. It's owned and operated by the Graduate Management Admissions Council. Real original, everybody. It's basically created for business schools by business schools. So all of the business, and I shouldn't say all, but a lot of the business schools across the country got together when the GMAT came out and said, how can we best test that students will be successful in our programs? And that's when they came up with the GMAT. The GMAT is very similar to the GRE. Slightly different in the way that it's kind of run. They're adaptive in different ways, but as far as the topics tested on the GMAT and the GRE, they're pretty similar. So GMAT testing, it's computer testing, and the nice thing is you can test on most days out of the year, similar to the GRE, whereas the MCAT and LSAT, either are very specific days and very specific months. The GMAT, you can take basically whenever you want, which is really nice. Then also the nice thing is right now they're doing at-home testing because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so if you are not comfortable going to a testing center, that's okay. You can test at home. If you are more comfortable going to a testing center, testing centers have began to reopen. So there is the opportunity for you to go to a testing center if that makes you more comfortable. Just know that you'll have to wear a mask. They are respecting social distancing, all of those things. So if you can test with a mask on for 4 hours and you would prefer going to a testing center than being at home with maybe you have roommates who are really loud, or you have a dog that barks and you don't want to have to worry about those, testing centers have began to reopen. The GMAT, because it's offered so often, you can take it every 16 days, basically. So if you take it, you don't get the score you need, and you want to take it again later, you can take it again 16 days later. Just remember, you can't take it more than any 5 times in a 12-month period. So that is a rolling calendar. So if you take it like 5 times back to back to back to back to back, you basically have to wait a whole year until one of them drops off. Totally okay. Again, I don't know any student who has taken it 5 times. I just mentioned it so you know all of the details, so you can leave here not having a whole lot of questions and getting all of the information. Scores are also good for 5 years, although some schools do request that you have a more recent test score. So some schools will say, we'd actually prefer that your scores be no older than 2 years old or 3 years old. But there are some schools that are, as long as your scores are still good, we'll accept them. So basically, skills you'll use in business school. I mentioned that. I always start with that. So what does and doesn't the GMAT test? Okay, business strategies, right? To get an MBA, you don't have to have a minor in business or an undergrad in business. You can have, again, any sort of degree. So maybe you are in education and you want to go get your MBA. Maybe you are in engineering and you want to, be some sort of manager at your firm. If you work for an engineering firm and that would help you, you can go get your MBA. So it doesn't test any business strategies, economics, entrepreneurships, none of those types of things. Like any other standardized test that I've mentioned, and you've probably now seen a pattern that we're on our 3rd test, reasoning skills, argument evaluation, data interpretation, reading comprehension. All standardized tests have some sort of reading comprehension on them. So you can kind of see the pattern. There's tips and tricks to mastering these standardized tests, and that's because although they're different, they're very similar, and there are tips and tricks to get the best score possible, and I want to help you get whatever score you need on whatever test you're going to take. So the GMAT is a computer adaptive test, and so what does that mean? So basically, you get a question. Your first question is going to be a level difficulty of 5. So questions can range from anywhere from a level 1 to like a level, I think the highest level is a 9. I wish it was 10 because that would be easier. So if you get your question 5 correct, it's going to get harder, right? So it gives you a harder question. So it goes to a level 6. If you get level 6 correct, it goes to a level 7. But say you get level 7 wrong. It's either going to give you a same level 7 again. If you get that wrong again, it will start dropping you down to a 6, 5, 4, so on and so forth. You kind of get the point. So each question is adaptive on the other. So what that means is you cannot skip around questions. You have to answer, you have to answer a question to move on to the next one. So unlike all of the other ones where you can go anywhere within a section, the GMAT, you have to go question by question. Now, you're not marked down for wrong answers. So if you are on a question, you're like, I have no idea. It's okay. Just guess and move on. You're not marked down for wrong answers, so you should never leave a question blank. And that goes for all of the other standardized tests. LSAT, MCAT, GRE, and GMAT. You are not marked down for wrong answers, so you should always guess, no matter, even if you just go in with the letter of the day and you're like, anytime I have to guess, I'm going to use answer choice A. That's totally okay. This is what the GMAT looks like. So there's a quantitative section. That's going to be your math section. Algebra, geometry, arithmetic, some of the trigonometry, pre-calculus stuff is going to be on that section. So the other thing to remember is there's no calculators allowed. So that's sometimes difficult if you haven't done geometry in a couple years. You might be like, ooh, I don't remember formulas. I know I've talked to students who are, they go back for their MBA a couple years after they've graduated college, and they haven't done geometry since they were like a junior in high school. So that's why some sort of review is important before you take these tests, just to kind of give your brain that refresh of, oh, this is what a geometry problem looks like. Then you'll have a verbal section. It's going to test a lot of grammar, a lot of vocabulary, your logic skills, your reading comprehension. Again, all of those will be on the verbal section. And then there's integrated reasoning. So the two big sections of the GMAT are quantitative and verbal. There's this integrated reasoning section that gets thrown in there, and that's scored separately from your quantitative verbal scores. And it tests your ability basically to look at charts and graphs and tables and make inferences. I consider it similar to a math section. You do get a nice little on-screen calculator. It is a very, very basic calculator, but you do get a calculator for this section. So you basically are looking at charts and graphs and figuring out what you can infer from those charts. You're also going to get an essay. It's an analysis of an argument or on business or a topic of general interest. It's not going to be something that you can't write about. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to give you an argument, and it wants you to criticize that argument. So this is what the scoring breakdown looks like. The 0 to 60, 0 to 60 reported in one point increments, and then your essay and integrated reasoning are scored separately. They will take your quantitative and verbal scores and transition them into a 200 to 800 point scale, so 10-point increments. So basically what they do is they take the 1 point increments you got, times it by 10, and you get on this 200 to 800 point scale. Percentiles, if you're kind of curious where you should be, a median score is a 564. Now, every business school is very different. I know schools that accept below a 564, and I know business schools who require students to have a 750. So if you're interested in a certain school, let's get together, let's chat about it, and I can help you figure out what score you need to get. This is just a few example problems, just because I've shown them for all the other ones. I wanted to make sure you could see what they look like. This is what a verbal problem would look like. This is the answer. This is the integrated reasoning. The math problems will look very similar to math, so I didn't feel like I needed to show that. But this is the integrated reasoning, because I know sometimes students, when I explain it, are like, I have no idea what this woman is talking about. And that's okay, because it is somewhat confusing. So this is where it says, here's the graph, and then below you'll have Kalamazoo and Kingston won the same number of games. And then you'll have to go back up and do some math. You have to look at their winning percentages, their number of games, figure out, how much their winning percentage based off their number of games. Is it the same number? So a lot of math goes into the integrated reasoning. You select true or false based on the math. If you're interested in learning about this problem and working through it, we do offer strategy sessions where we'll dive deeper into all of the practice problems. So now the one you have all been waiting for. What is the GRE? Well, it's the Graduate Record Examination. It's required by most master's and doctorate level programs. So if it isn't housed under one of the other tests, right? MCAT, LSAT, GMAT, and then dental school and optometry school and some of those other ones I mentioned at the beginning. If it doesn't fall under one of those specialized tests, The master's program or doctorate level program will fall under the GRE. It encompasses the most programs out there by any standardized test. So if you're considering a master's of science, a master's of criminal justice, a master's of education, a master's of, I'm blanking, any other masters that I might not be talking, or might not be mentioning, it falls under this program. We talked about it is accepted by some business and law schools. There are some programs out there that are going to require you to take what we call the GRE subject test. So if you're looking at a master's of, say, mathematics, they're probably going to ask that you take the GRE subject test. So unlike the GRE that's offered pretty much any day throughout the year, the GRE subject tests are only offered 3 months throughout the year. October, November, and April are the 3 months that you can take the GRE subject test. Now, if you're looking at applying to schools in the next year or so, I know schools have been very lenient about the subject test just because there hasn't been as many opportunities to take them, and with COVID and everything going on, they've been lenient on saying, you know, we're going to require them, but I do expect them to make maybe somewhat of a comeback. Maybe they'll go away completely. It's hard to say, but I want to mention them just in case you do have a school that says we require blank and blank subject test. When I talk about consistent pattern for, you know, which schools and programs require the GRE, as you might have noticed, some schools will say they're GRE optional, right? Like if you take it, great. If you don't take it, we'll still look at your application. Now, always having a test score, even if they're test optional, is going to help you. And I say that because say there are two of you and you both have similar undergraduate GPAs, similar experiences, similar extracurricular like clubs and organizations that you were involved in. You're similar applicants across the board, but one of you has a GRE score and one of you doesn't. Most likely they're going to accept the student with the GRE score. Also, some schools or programs don't require the GRE at all. Some might accept you on a case-by-case basis, where they'll accept you with no GRE score and require that you take it within the first year. Some might also say, you had a lower score, we're still going to accept you, but you have to take it within a year and get a higher score. So all sorts of things. Again, that's where I said that there's no consistent pattern. If you're interested in a certain school or program, let me know and I can help you do some research to figure out what they're going to require. So the other thing, very similar, I think, to everything I mentioned today, they all follow a very similar pattern. The GRE is conducted at ETS or by ETS, and they test at Prometric testing centers. So Prometric testing centers also do, if you know anyone who's taken like a praxis exam, or sometimes they'll do, like if you have to take like an FBI exam, they do those at Prometric testing centers. All sorts of tests are done at these testing centers. They basically put you into little cubicles with a computer, and they give you these like old-fashioned, like really old headphones that you can wear. Most students opt out of them because they're just not comfortable, but you can wear them. They are starting again to reopen these testing centers, but if you would prefer to test at home, you can, and I expect them to kind of continue that probably through summer as well. It's done online by a system called ProctorU. So basically what it does is it locks your computer screen, so you can only go in the testing program. And then it's also going to require you to have a webcam, which I saw most of you on camera, so you should have, and then a microphone, because they have to be able to see you and hear you the entire time you're testing. The other caveat with testing at home is instead of having scratch paper, they make you have a small whiteboard. If you don't have a small whiteboard, which most people don't at home, I don't. I did do some research for my students. Most dollar stores sell them, like the little kid ones, for like $1. Also, we got creative. If you have one of those page protectors, if you slide a white piece of paper in it, dry erase markers work the same way on that as they would on a whiteboard. And ETS has said that's fine. You just can't have like a stack of like paper to use as scratch paper. They just said, you know, you could have stuff on there for cheating. So basically you have to show your whiteboard at the beginning, show that it's empty, show your testing area around you on your webcam, and then you're able to start your test. You can take it 5 times in a calendar. Again, that's that rolling calendar year. Don't know anyone that's taken it 5 times. And then scores are good for 5 years. Some programs might ask for more recent scores, but I know a lot of them that are okay with if you have scores that are 5 years old. I know it's really helpful of if you're in that testing mentality now, right? Maybe you're an undergrad and you're going to graduate and you're like, I think I want to go to grad school, but I want to take a year off. Take the test now, get it out of the way when you're still in that school mode, take your year off, and then your scores are still going to be good when you decide to apply to your graduate programs. GRE sections and scoring, very, like I remember I said, very similar to the GMAT. There's 2 quantitative sections, 2 verbal sections, 2 essays on this one. One is analysis of an issue, one's analysis of an argument. So the issue one, you basically get to give your opinion. And then the analysis of an argument, they don't want your opinion. What they want is you to criticize that argument. They want to see that you can, what are the flaws in that argument? How can the argument's reasoning be made better? The analysis of an issue, take a side, give some examples, prove why you took that side, pretty easy. You get 30 minutes for each essay, so I know that's a short amount of time, so I always recommend practicing writings and just a short essay in 30 minutes so you get used to what that feels like. That experimental section will either be quantitative or verbal. You won't know which one is experimental until day of. So if you have 3 verbal, you'll know, okay, well, I have an experimental verbal section. The issue is you won't know which one is experimental until you get your scores back. So always try your hardest on all sections. However, if you notice a section is super easy or super hard, the chances might be high that it's the experimental, but I'd say never assume because you want to make sure you try your hardest just in case that is one of the scored sections. On the quantitative section, very basic math, algebra, geometry, arithmetic, data interpretation. Probably stuff you haven't done since high school. So there's a lot of memorization for formulas that go into preparing for the GRE math section. But you do get this nice little basic calculator. So if any of you had an older computer where you typed in calculator and this that gray one popped up, this calculator is very similar to that one. It has basic add, subtraction functions, square roots, multiplication, division, but outside of that, nothing crazy. If you have a smartphone and everyone has the calculator that's automatically comes on your phone, that's a good one to practice with because it has the same basic functions. The GRE vocab is the GRE verbal is vocab heavy. There are lots and lots and lots of vocab words tested on the GRE. So if you're thinking of preparing and you want to prepare for the GRE, I recommend getting some flashcards, a GRE vocab book, some sort of vocab study material to help you kind of remember all of these words because they use words that are not common in the English language, right? They're not words that we use in conversational speech every day. One of the ones I always use is benevolent. The GRE likes to use benevolent, I feel like, on every test. I don't know anyone that uses the word benevolent in their day-to-day conversations, but the GRE is going to test you on it. It's also going to test you on reading comprehension and then that analysis that we've seen on some of the other tests as well. Sorry, the slides are not maybe going to move forward. So this one is computer adaptive, but unlike the GMAT, it's computer adaptive by section. So you can navigate anywhere within a section. So if you want to flag a question, come back to it at the end, you absolutely can. So say you're in the first quantitative section and you want to skip to question 20. You can do so and then go back to question 1. You just can't skip to another section. Similar to any other standardized test, like if you remember taking the SAT or the ACT, the GRE is kind of an advanced version of that. So it's adaptive by section. So your first section of verbal and your first section of quantitative are going to be medium difficulty. If you do well, the next section will be hard, half and half, medium, poorly, easy. The first section, though, is super important. And I say this because it helps boost your score at the beginning. So say you do really well on section 1 of quantitative. It's going to boost your score up to maybe close to a perfect score, 170 range. Even if you get most of those mostly hard questions incorrect, your score is not going to fall that much. Maybe it'll go from a 170 to a 150, maybe to a 160, depending on how you do, and a 160 is where you want to be. But what's hard is if you get that first section mostly wrong and you get down to mostly easy, even if you get every single one of those mostly easy questions correct, it's much harder to bring you back up to the top. So that's why I said that first section of verbal, first section of quantitative are super important. Now, if you get a really easy section thrown at you and you're super worried, like, I must have done really bad, I'm really stressed about this, like, again, it could be that experimental section that I was mentioning. So don't let that get to you, right? Maybe you also just got a super easy GRE that day. They change up the questions all the time. So don't let sections, don't try to like read into much of it. I do the same thing. I am guilty of it, of like reading into things like, this is a really easy section. I must have done really bad. Don't let that get to you. Just keep moving forward, doing the questions you can. You're gonna, whatever happens is going to happen. This is what a GRE question looks like. So a multiple choice math question. See along the top, you'll have that calculator. You can mark it. So if you want to mark a question to come back to it at the end, that review one, if you want your list of all questions. If you need help with like the computer system, that's the help button. And then your forward and next, or your forward and back buttons. Pretty simple. The other thing about the GRE is they have what we call select all that apply. So this one, you have to select all of the integers that could work for the value of x, like what could be the value of x. So you have to basically solve and figure out what all of the values could be for x. Well, unlike like college exams where you might get partial credit if you get 2 of the 3 correct, you have to get all 3 or no points. So just, if you have to guess, move on. Don't waste too much time on one question trying to figure out like maybe the last possible answer. Answer the questions to the best of your ability and move on. I just always mention the select all that apply, so you have to get all of the correct answers to get the point. And then the last one that I mentioned is the sentence equivalency ones. So this is where I mentioned the vocab is pretty heavy. It gives you a sentence and you have to choose the vocab words that fit into that blank. For sentence equivalency, there's always going to be 2 correct answers. There will never be more, there will never be less, there will always be 2 correct answers. So you have to pick the 2 vocab words that fit into that blank. Again, no partial credit given if you get one, but not the other. You have to get both to get the point, but you're not marked down for wrong answers. So you're not getting a point taken away if you get it wrong. You're just not adding a point if you don't get it correct, basically. So some truths and misconceptions. I want to get to question and answer, so I'm not going to spend too much time going back and forth on this. These tests don't say anything about your intelligence. So if you study with standardized tests, don't let that get to you. People struggle with regular tests, let alone standardized tests. These tests are written to trick you, right? The test writers are trying to trick you. And that's why there's some strategies you can learn to do better on these tests. They say nothing about your GPA. And the last thing is the best score does not always win in the admissions process. Does a good score help you get into your grad school program? Yes, 100%. But is that the only thing that's going to get you in? No. Schools are going to look at your GPA, your experiences, your letters of recommendation, your essays. What extra, were you involved in clubs and organizations in college? Maybe you were in a business honor society or some other honor society. They're going to look at your overall application. The best score does not always win in the admissions process. You might have a perfect score, but the rest of your application sucks. It doesn't mean you're going to get into grad school just because you have a perfect score. But something to remember is test scores can be used to award aid. So for law school, the higher the LSAT score, the more money a school might be likely to give you to come to their program. So that merit-based aid, high scores can help you with that. And these tests, do they test what you've learned in college? Yeah, yes and no, right? Yeah, some of the math sections, reading comprehension, grammar, those types of things, yes. The MCAT, all of that science knowledge is what you've learned in high school. But on the other hand, it's testing in a way that's much less familiar to students. Also, because it's so aggressively timed, it's much harder to test for standardized testing. Schools are also going to look at your college transcripts. We talked about that. They need to know what your undergraduate GPA was. Your statements of purpose, those are going to be your essays, and they're going to be different program to program. Always make sure you have someone read them before you submit them. When I write, I use the word that as a filler. I don't know why I do it. I just do it. And when I read back through my writing, I don't catch it. But when I have someone else read through it, they catch those things for me. So whether it's a mom or dad, a professor, a mentor, a friend that's really good at writing, just have someone read through it and get feedback. Also make sure your statement of your purpose is unique to you. The application committee wants to get to know about you, right? They want to see who you are as an applicant. So yes, tests are important to help you get into grad school, but they're not the only thing that's going to get you in. If you are curious about how to prep, we have tons of different options, classes, prep books, self-prep, boot camps, tutors, tons of different options out there. I'm happy to share and figure out what might work best for you. We also have tons of free resources, strategy sessions, sample classes, homework help, practice tests, I mentioned sample classes. We have a med school management tool. We have a Connects question and answer app. So if you're curious, you can download this Connects app. It is, yes, only one N, CONECTS. It's a free app. You can take a homework problem, like a picture of your homework problem. And there's tons of different tutors and people on there that can help you answer that question. If you have questions about an application, you can ask them on there as well. That homework help is really helpful if you're studying in a certain subject. We have tutors that are able to jump online with you 24/7 and help you. If you see this QR code that's right in the middle there, I want to give you free resources. I want to share everything that I have with you. I want to give you all of the free stuff that I can. So if you take out your phones and you scan that QR code, it's just a short little survey. It just asks for your name, your email, and then which test that you're involved in. And I will send you all of the free resources that I can for that test. I will send you a practice test. I will send you upcoming strategy sessions. I will send you some helpful links, some blogs. I will give you all of the free resources I can. You just have to let me know which test you're interested in so I can share that information with you. So I will leave this. Actually, I think it's again on this slide. The QR code is again on this slide. So if you want to go ahead and scan that, I will make sure to follow up with you. That is my contact information. That my colleague Todd, who is also here, he was helping with the chat box. He is also able to help as well. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. That 720 number, that 720-575-6618 is my direct office line. Please do not hesitate to call me. I'm in the office Monday through Friday. You send me an email on the weekends. I am great at checking emails on the weekends. I don't know if it's always a good thing, but I will get back to you as soon as possible if you have any questions. Are there any questions that I can answer right now?
Oh, can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Wonderful presentation. I just kind of wanted to ask, because I know that for civil engineers, I am a civil engineer, and we do have to take the PE and the FE. So I wanted to know if you guys have anything geared towards those or no, or y'all just focused on this particular test.
So we don't have anything right now for the PE ones, but if you send me an email, I will make sure to send you and connect you with another company or someone that I know can. We don't offer anything for those right now. We are forever expanding our products. We just started doing CFAs, if you know someone trying to take the CFA exam. But no, not right now. We don't do anything, but I can make sure to find you someone that does.
All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Hi,
Yeah.
Ms. Coleen. My name is
Hi.
Kiana. I'm a junior civil engineer, major at Tennessee State University, and watching your presentation has actually made me consider, like, business school. So I just wanted to ask if you know anyone who has gotten their MBA and also like a master's in civil engineering or engineering, or their experience with taking both, or do you know anybody who's done that?
Yeah, so actually I know a lot of people who have done they get some sort of other master's degree and then they'll go on and get like an MBA as well. An MBA, if you're looking to be in like some sort of management someday, an MBA is always going to help you. It's probably the most encompassing master's program out there. So what's nice is sometimes what will happen is if you get one master's degree and then you go back for an MBA, they won't require you to do like the GRE again. If you already have a master's degree, they won't require as many of the same prerequisites. So sometimes it's a little bit easier if you already have like a master's of civil engineering to go and get an MBA. And the same thing, there's also dual programs. So I know I know for law school, there are some schools that will offer a dual like JD, which is what you get when you graduate law school, and an MBA. So instead of being a 3-year program, it just turns into a 4-year program, but you graduate with both an MBA and a Juris Doctor for law school. So there might be a program too where you can get both, or a school that will allow you to get both.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If you have other questions, reach out to me. We can chat one-on-one about it as well. Any other questions? You don't have to be shy. You can ask me any question. I'm happy to, I mean, it's within reason. Some questions I might not be able to answer. If not, that's totally okay. You can always reach out to me at a later date, and I'm very happy to help.
Okay, we want to thank you very much, Ms. Reed and Mr. Clark. Folks, let's share with them how we appreciate their taking time to be with us today and to share this wonderful information.
Thank you. I see all of the little emojis. Those make my heart so happy. Thank you for having me, Dr. Perkins. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And we look forward to having you join us again in the future.
I look forward to it. I hope, hopefully in person one year. I'm very excited.
For sure. Okay.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day, everyone.
And you have a wonderful Easter holiday as well.
You as well. Happy Easter, everybody.
Okay.